In the forefront of the news, new personalities keep appearing and disappearing. The revolutionary idols have included Che Guevara of Cuba, Berkeley's Mario Savio, Stokely Carmichael, the Abby Hoffmans, Eldridge Cleavers, and Bobby Seals. In Europe, Danny the Red Cohn-Bendit. But perhaps the most effective of all these revolutionaries in really shaking the establishment has been a 22-year-old girl, Bernadette Devlin, an orphan, an Irish Catholic in an Irish Protestant country. A year ago tonight, she was a student at Queen's University, Belfast. Tonight, she is a member of the British Parliament, the youngest MP in 50 years, an idol of the revolutionary young, and so far out of jail. 6 weeks ago, she was found guilty on 4 counts of inciting to riot. Her appeal comes up later this month. If it fails, she goes to jail for 6 months. So tonight, we thought it would be a good time to take a close look at this Irish revolutionary, Bernadette Devlin. Her supporters see her as brave, impetuous, charismatic, a modern Joan of Arc, fighting to free her country from oppression. She sees herself in terms more down to earth.
I was born into a working class family. My father was a carpenter who spent most of his working life in England for 2 main reasons. Work was very scarce at home, and when there was work at home, he had been forced to go to England anyway because his cards had been stamped for no reason with the word political suspect, which meant he couldn't get a job in the north of Ireland. He died when I was 9 years of age. We continued to live in the council house until my mother died about 2-3 years ago.
Bernadette's political education began when the first Civil Rights March was held in Londonderry in October 1968.
I took part in this march vaguely because I felt it was getting somewhere to what I wanted to do. And as far as I was concerned, it was one of these peaceful civil rights marches. Go along, make your protest, and go home. The police brutality in Derry did something much more important than focus the attention of civilization on Northern Ireland. It awakened the people of Northern Ireland, particularly the students. I know what it's like to live in an unbalanced society, because the more you become involved in it, the more you realize that the whole problem is much bigger than a few bigoted members of the government. It's the whole system that's wrong.
I don't accept the ruling power of the unionist government. I don't accept the ruling power of the 26 county fiasco. I accept only the ruling power of the people, for the people, and by the people. That way, and that way alone, we'll get justice.
Telling it as she saw it got her elected member of Parliament in last April's election by a coalition of Protestants and Catholics. She says she speaks for the oppressed working people, Protestants as well as Catholics.
I might almost be what is called a Protestant Catholic. You know, in the meaning of the word Protestant, I'm a protesting Catholic. But I have a weird idea, which may be weird, that the Buddhists and the Hindus are as right as any of the Christian churches, because it's the principle that counts. And Christianity, I do believe, comes down to loving your neighbour in its widest sense. It basically comes down to socialism.
These annual marches by the Protestant Men of Orange, the ruling Unionist Party, have almost always ended in provocative name-calling at the least, and more usually fistfights, rock-throwing, and riots. While the Orange Order marched, Miss Devlin was down on the Bogside, the Catholic working man's stronghold of Londonderry, with her people, helping to organize and throw up makeshift barricades to ward off the inevitable troubles that everyone expected.
Away from the police. That's all right for you, sir. You stay out. There's a tiny little boy standing beside you. That child's neck is just in
The next 48 hours in this battle of the Bogside were the most critical in her career.
They'll come down when we're not armed. That's it. Surely.
It is of no relevance who starts the stone throwing on these occasions. What does matter is that it always ends up with an invasion of the Catholic slum area by the police.
The Catholics of the Bogside defended themselves with trash can covers, which they call bin lids.
Anybody who has a bin lid that is prepared to bring it out here, will bring it out now. The fellas at the top of that street are holding the police off. They're getting hit with stones. If they had bin lids, they could beat the police back, and then we could get organised with a barricade on the top of that hill.
Bernadette charged the police were supported by the extremist followers of the Reverend Ian Paisley, the Paisleyites. From a command post, she telephoned the Ulster government's Minister of Home Affairs, Mr. Porter, to report her side of the fighting.
I heard the police officer in charge say that he had almost 200 men and enough supporters, and the supporters were Paisleyites, to finish the Bogside off once and for all. His exact words were that they had enough men to eat the Bogside. There were other witnesses to this police broadcast. Then the police charged into the area, together with the Paisleyites, who were carrying Union Jacks and singing their apprentice boys' song, "We're up to our knees in Fenian blood." And they stood there in the Bogside, singing it repeatedly, until the people of the Bogside turned on them and drove both the police and the Paisleyites out of the area again.
When the police started using tear gas, Miss Devlin, like any good revolutionary, knew what to do.
You shouldn't rubberize.
Don't give her
we're off itself.
Don't give her anything to drink and rub her eyes with a dry cloth.
It's all right, man.
Put Vaseline on it. Was that more gas? Wait, did we attack them with pepper?
Keep it away.
Mr. Porter, sir, I assure you, on my honour, that the police have been continually firing gas pellets into this area since 11 o'clock last night. They have been constantly using it, and they still are. And the people in this area will not surrender to the police, because it is not a matter of a police force fighting rioters. It is a matter of guerrilla warfare between two opposing factions. I have been here for 24 hours, and I can say for a fact that I would not walk out past the police cordon, even to walk up and try to talk to them, because they have hurled abuse across the barricades at me and suggested what they will do when they get into the Bogside, that they will tear it apart until they find me, and having found me, they will tear me apart.
When she wasn't working the command post or manning the barricades, Bernadette got the word out to the world by talking to the press.
Why do you think this particular trouble started this time? Not, you know, I mean, what started it off?
Millions of reasons why it started.
Was the march provocation?
It was the fact that the march took place, the fact that the people in this area have never been allowed to march for the much more important things, like jobs for the people of this area, like houses, like the ability for the women in this area to put their kids to bed at night and to know that no policemen or anybody else are going to come down this area and attack them. That's what they're asking for. They're asking for some kind of the right to some kind of control over their own lives and not always be dictated to, not always treated as scum on two bases. On the basis, one, that they're disloyal, and on the second and more important basis, that they're working class people and therefore not fit to have their say in the government of the elite landed gentry of the Chichester Clarks and the Captain O'Neills.
You feel your voice is better heard here than in Parliament?
I have been to Parliament, and I must say that some of the cartoons in the newspaper really do amuse me in these troubled hours. But I have been to Parliament. In fact, all those people who have criticised me for not being to Parliament, I have been there when they haven't. I have done more in the short term that I have been in Parliament than any of the Ulster MPs did while they were in their first month at Parliament. But what I haven't done is join the club. I haven't sat around the Strangers' Bar and chatted up all the stupid people that sit in it so that I can become part of the establishment, because I'm not interested in being part of their parliamentary establishment. I went to Parliament to tell Harold Wilson the kind of thing that was happening in the Bogside and in other areas in the north, and to tell him to get his finger out and get it sorted out. I didn't go there to join his bloody crew. So it's of no importance to me if they don't like me.
As the fury of the riot grew, Miss Devlin called Home Minister Porter again to negotiate.
If in fact they stop throwing petrol bombs and do nothing, will the police leave the area? If the police stop using gas, I will see what I can do. I cannot promise you anything. I mean, I am not in a position to order the people of the Bogside, whereas you are in a position to order the police. Perhaps we will see whether your orders are any more efficient than my suggestions. Okay? Thank you. Nothing.
Mr. Porter's answer was to order the Special Constabulary, the B Specials, to report for duty. These auxiliaries are especially hated by the Catholics in the Bogside, so they redoubled their efforts to turn out more gasoline bombs.
Come out and the petrol go all over his back. That's why we've had people burned down there. So get the cork in very, very tight, as tight as you can.
That night, Major Chichester Clark, the Prime Minister of Northern Ireland, went on television to deliver a warning.
The responsible should know this.
Here it
The law must and will be maintained. We are now acting to strengthen the hand of the forces of law and order. We will also use the Special Constabulary to the full, not for riot or crowd control, but to relieve the regular police of other duties. And of course, the civil power in Northern Ireland, as in other parts of the United Kingdom, will not shrink from the obligation to summon other aid if the situation demands. As for the immediate situation, as it exists in Londonderry now, I gather there are malicious rumours to the effect that if rioting ceases, retribution will fall upon all the people of the Bogside. This is completely untrue. We want peace and not vengeance. The rioters withdraw peacefully to their homes and observe the law. No attempt will be made to exploit the situation. I give this assurance in the name of the government and in the earnest hope that it may contribute to peace.
The Prime Minister's warning and appeals served only to pour more fuel on the fire. The second night's fires burned out of control. The next day, Harold Wilson, the Prime Minister of England, sent British troops into Londonderry. Miss Devlin and her Bogsiders had won. The problem of civil rights in Northern Ireland now had worldwide attention.
I have not done anything to offend Her Majesty the Queen, and I have done nothing to offend Her Majesty's government, except inasmuch as I have insisted that Her Majesty's government take action against the subsidiary Parliament of Northern Ireland, who have sought to increase their own gain and make a travesty of any kind of justice or government or even democracy in the north of Ireland. The people I have betrayed are the Unionist Party and the Unionist government. The strongest point in our favour against those who would say we were involved in violent attack of the forces of law and order is that when the British Army were called in, the people of the Bogside saw the arrival of the army as the removal of the police from the scene, and the fighting stopped, because by removing the RUC, the threat to the safety of the people of Bogside was removed.
With the fighting over, the embattled Miss Devlin found herself officially charged with inciting to riot, assault against the police, disorderly behavior, and using abusive language. Some members of the press said she threw rocks and made firebombs.
Now, this makes me a character of somewhat dubious integrity. But nonetheless, had I been a student in Czechoslovakia with exactly the same ideas, I would be treated as the British press, by the British press, as some kind of hero, somebody who was prepared to look the jackboot of communism and oppression in the face. The interesting point about criticisms of myself is that they have completely failed to criticize the real faults, which I do have. The main one of these is that I don't have a place in Parliament, not because of any of the criticisms stated, but because I'm not a politician. A, I'm not wise enough, and B, I'm not prepared to be shrewd enough. Had I been a good politician, the last thing I would have done would have been seen in the Bogside, actually organising people to defend the area, because that's bad politics. The biggest fault, which I would personally consider, is a certain amount of arrogance, which makes me say something which is my own opinion, as if it were a recognised statement of fact, which the whole world was prepared to admit, with the exception of a few idiots. And this simply isn't true. It's the way I say it. And this arrogance, coupled with a certain amount of, indeed too much emotionalism, in when I do state facts, leads to people taking what I say as being a veiled threat. And this, to me, is very serious. To me, it has been personally one of my own drawbacks, because it frightens people whom I desperately want to convince. I left for America because the violence was spreading throughout Northern Ireland, and the people suffering most were ordinary people who were losing their homes, losing their property. And money was necessary to help reinstate these people. And America seemed the best place to get money. It was a bad thing in America to talk about the similarities between the problems in Ireland and the Negro problem in America. Mainly among the Irish American leaders, they were the reactionary people opposed to the black civil rights movement, and therefore it offended them to compare Ireland with the black problem. What I would like people to realise about Bernadette Devlin is not that she was a phenomenon, but she was just an ordinary person. And what I wanted to do was change the society I lived in. I was just one of a number of people who grew up in a society we didn't want to grow old in. It's a sick society. I just wish that other people would just try to put themselves in my shoes, not as Bernadette Devlin, but as one 22-year-old girl from a working class background living in Northern Ireland. There are millions, at least there are hundreds of Bernadette Devlins in the north of Ireland who are of no interest to the British public. They're not newsworthy. They don't know what to do either. They can't live in the society they find themselves in. They don't know how to change it. And in conscience, they can't leave it and forget about it. We're the people they call extremists. I might be imprisoned. I might be persecuted in some way. I don't think all the crosswords in the world would keep me happy or endear me to a system that had put me in prison. But as I say, there's not much you can do about it. Either you're going or you're not going. And somehow I think I'm going.
Whether Miss Devlin goes to jail or not, the world undoubtedly has not yet heard the last of her. This portrait of Bernadette Devlin was originally produced by the ATV network in London. Under British law, it cannot be shown in Northern Ireland until her trial is completed. I'm Harry Reasoner.
I'm Mike Wallace. We'll be back 2 weeks from tonight on February 17th with another edition of 60 Minutes.